Kirua, this is us, all of us. There is an affiliation there listed, and what is important, I think, is that we have got two past chairmen of the section, and here my commitment has always been to remind ourselves why we do these awards. I think it is important to recognize that we are building a core of the knowledge of religion and international studies. So you have got here a sort of a flip back to the Johnston and Jonathan Fox and Jeffrey Haynes and all of these six, and we now make a little space here for the awardee of 2021. And if we had the movie done now, there will be an applause, but we can't hear it. And now we are making the space here for this year's awardee, Daniel Philpott, professor from Notre Dame. So the next thing what we do is that we actually analyze point by point. It gives us a structure to this video. We go through the award letter, which will show shortly, and I think Renat will highlight how we actually justified that Dan got this award.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Vendulka, for this introduction. And yes, one of the members of the selection committee, Scott Thomas, in fact, pointed out that it's surprising that the Professor Philpott, a professor of his caliber, did not receive this award earlier, and this is because he was one of the earliest scholars who spearheaded the religious turn in the study of international relations. And of course, to list all of the different reasons why he is deserving of this award will take a lot of time. And and he's been contributing for a quarter of a century. But it's important to note that he is a key member of the first generation of scholars of this religious turn in international relations. And his early work still continues to be listed on the syllabi of the religion NIR courses. Again, his books have gained significant scholarly awards. And also, it's noteworthy that he has published in some of the top journals in the discipline of international relations, including world politics, which, of course, very, very few scholars of religion and IR managed to get into. Yes. So Professor Kuru wrote in his nomination letter that Philpott challenged the hegemony of rational choice in the study of political science discipline. And again, that particular approach, way of looking into phenomena, dismisses ideas, ideology as essentially less than relevant factors. And of course, he did not stop there. And his research agenda is very expansive. He has written on the relationship between religion and ethics, democracy, peace building, reconciliation, religious freedom. And I think what's also important is that he is not just sitting in the office trying to come up with the abstract ideas, but he is engaged in something which is very rarely found in political science and IR research, and this is sort of intervention research. So he's been serving and on the activist side, and he's worked with various religious leaders in Kashmir, in Central Africa, pertaining to peace and reconciliation, and also has conducted a major study on forgiveness in the aftermath of violence in Uganda.
Yeah, and what I would like to add to it, that certainly from my point of view, now that the international relations is becoming global, it is important, and I have, in my opinion, my selection was based on the concern for the future of this subfield. And I think the award is a responsibility. award is also, urging Dan to, in his influencing of the subfield of international relations, to make the religion section more inclusive. We have not had anybody who is essentially non-Western yet. And I think that is very, very important, because the global international relations now brings to the table different ways of knowing, different methodologies, and so on and so forth.
Yes, and yes, thank you so much. And yes, Professor Philpott, yes, please.
Well, yeah, I have asked him to give us something a little bit, lighthearted. I wanted a photograph, and he gave us a photograph where he actually, posed for his colleagues, because he claimed that he looks like Thomas More. But I made out of it a show of all of his books, because there he is when he got his Harvard PhD, and through his hands now we have got a procession of all of the books which he has in the last 20 years has made. And I trust that many of you will be then drilling into the individual books. So this is just a procession for us to realize the extraordinary productivity of him. And the last thing which I then asked him for was, after the award-winning book, which will be coming shortly, is that we asked him to give us a scrapbook, so that we illustrate his exceptional. This was a book which actually got an award, and that this one is a scrapbook. He gave us a scrapbook, and we are now going to flick to the scrapbook of photographs. And I think the Kristen will talk about it. Some highlights of his presentations and awards and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. And yes, as a graduate student, we've had to go through a lot of Dr. Philpott's work. So some of his very cool academic achievements, speaking at the Religious Freedom Institute for the book Religious Freedom in Islam. Here he was invited to speak at the prestigious Princeton test lectures. Followed there by an interview with the Kyle Human Show back in 2018 for Abuse, Scandals, and Forgiveness, his book. And right here we have at Baylor University, where he talked about another one of his very great works. So lots of very interesting academic career and academic achievements.
And what I want to add is that what I think is significant, that one of his quotes is actually on the website of the institute, and it is very, very apropos today that without religious freedom, there is no possibility to have a decent society. So, and it is a great honor for him to actually be enshrined like that. And proceeding from that, adding to what Renat already said, that he is rare because he's not just sitting on the tower, the tower of ivory, and dreaming up conceptual sort of a scheme, which many political scientists do, but he actually has descended to the real people on a number of occasions into very dangerous situations. So, we will actually highlight some of the pictures from where he went to Uganda and other places. So I think it's Renat who will simply say that these are the locations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, thank you. Yes, and absolutely. Dan has, lent us this scrapbook with the glimpses of his experience on the ground, on the field, in essentially training groups in of reconciliation. For example, in the previous photographs, you have seen him taking part in the refugee law project in Uganda. On this particular photograph, he is taking part in the workshop on peace building in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Yes. Further, we're going to South Africa here. And again, it's the a workshop titled "Peace Building from the Ground Up" that he had organized in South Africa. Again, more from South Africa in the next on the next picture here, and back to the Democratic Republic of the Congo here. And then, yeah, so that I think Kristen is going to take over now.
Indeed, here he has his work he went to Kashmir, conducting work with the Faith-Based Reconciliation. And here he's pictured with a relief official who he also worked with, Bashir Mir. And also in Kashmir, he had the opportunity to work with the Sayyid Ali Shah for the Hurriyat conference in Jammu and Kashmir. And of course, what any young academic studying this would love to meet, he had the opportunity to meet the Holy Pope.
And now we close the scrapbook and just reflect on it to say that he is a beginner, really. He has only done, 20 years of professional career. And the conclusion which anybody has got to reach is that for him, sky is the limit. And we congratulate him, and we discussed it with him that it would be nice to have a bottle. So I arranged, there is a virtual bottle there, even with pop. And just in case you missed it, we will do the bottle again in the concluding saying there is a bottle again which will pop. And we congratulate this year's awardee and wish him and wish us that he continues on this incredible path. And with that said, I think we are bringing this to the end, but we pass the buck. Here you are, there's the cork, that was for real. And we then pass the buck on to Professor Scott, I'm so sorry, I have been thinking about Scott Thomas because we cited him once, but it's Jonathan Fox who actually created his own presentation, and he will be focusing on certain of the books which we have introduced only in a very general terms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vandalka. And I'm going to start, and I will also end by saying congratulations, Dan. This is very, very, very well deserved, and it's about time. But I'm going to talk a little bit about a guy named Daniel Philpott, who I'm calling the eternal revolutionary in religion in IR, because you keep revolutionizing the way, at least I think about it. And I'm going to talk about a selection, by no means all, but a selection of what I think are the most important works that you wrote, at least as far as what influenced me the most, and some of the ideas that you introduced that influenced me the most. And I imagine others also, but this is a personal presentation from me to you about all the influence you've had on my thinking. I'm going to say I have to move my face off the... there we go. Okay. Two of your earliest articles, both in World Politics, The Religious Roots of Modern International Relations, and The Challenge of September 11th to Secularism and International Relations, were and continue to be exceedingly important. At that time, nobody was writing on religion in IR. There were no articles in top journals, and you're sitting there publishing in World Politics, tackling some of the most important questions, including why his IR had a blind spot for religion, because it very much did. I very much recall that panel we had, I think it was the year after 9/11 at the ISA, when there's a whole bunch of us on the panel, and the room was filled with people who were very confused because suddenly they realized maybe this religion thing is important. And you were there, I was there, a number of other people were there, but you had a lot of important things to say specifically about IR. You talked about the Westphalian origins of IR's religion blind spot, which is now pretty much gospel, but you were really one of the first to discuss that. You were also among the first to take up the challenge of asking, how do we address a secularized IR? And that was a big question. It's still a big question, but it's less of a question to a great extent because of you, Dan. And what happened? I just lost, let's try that again. Play. I'm just yenning for Zoom. I'm sorry. Okay, now how do there we go. Christianity and Democracy, the Catholic Wave, another article in a major journal, Journal of Democracy. And to represent the Catholic Church, I, of course, chose Touchdown Jesus, which I'm sure Dad recognizes. Anybody who's been to Notre Dame knows about that. If you haven't, they used to be able to see that Jesus above the goalposts where they play football, and it looks like he's going touchdown the way the Americans do. So, of course, that's Touchdown Jesus at Notre Dame. But this was, more importantly, this is one of the first studies of the evolution of the Catholic Church's approach to democracy and its impact in particular on Latin America. In and of itself, I think it's an incredibly important study of the Catholic Church. A lot of people are very much parroting now what you said in that article, some of them giving you credit for it, some of them, unfortunately, not. But the whole process of change in the foreign policy, I think that was that in itself was a very important insight. But I think the article is more important for another reason, because it was really a foundational study, at least I look at it this way, on how religious institutions can have an impact on foreign policy, which of course I wrote as impactful. So that's my obligatory correctly spelled typo, word check error. But this is really, if you want to know how to do a study, how to write a study of how a religious institution, whether it be the Catholic Church or any other institution, can have an impact on foreign policy, this is the model I would follow. It's how you do such a study. And I think anybody who's writing a study on this should read this article and should probably cite it. For those reasons, it was very important for me. And I do cite this article often. Your foundational article in the Annual Review of Political Science has a study of global politics found religion. There's so many, many, many important things in that, but the one that I keep coming back to is your discussion of secularism. When you discuss secularism in that article, I never really thought about it the same again. The way that you discussed it, it is impossible to discuss the word secular in any form without reference to religion. That was a very important insight. It really means that secularism is intrinsically linked to religion in a way a lot of people are unwilling to consider. And when you're talking about secularism in politics, you're also talking about religion in politics. They're really very much two sides of the same coin, although I thought the little yin-yang thing I put together was probably a little bit better. And I did find a very good comic for that topic, for those, if you guys can read it. Then I'm going to move on to God Century, very foundational book. Now, I realize you had co-authors on this book, Tim Shah and Monica Toft, who made important contributions. But I know the work of the three of you pretty well, that I'm pretty sure I know which parts you wrote. And the parts Tim and Monica wrote were very important and excellent, but the parts you wrote, for me, were far more important. It really dealt with a number of questions that I was dealing with at the time, and I'm still grappling with a little bit, but it's very, very important to me. I mean, first you talked about the history of religion and state in the West from a different perspective than I've seen anybody else do. And I think that's very important for anybody who wants to understand how we arrived at where we are. But more importantly for me, it provides one of the best answers, if not for not only why was there a religious resurgence, but why it happened when it did. There are very, very few people who've really addressed that, and this is probably the best discussion of that I've seen, at least in the Western context. And you really are dealing with the Western context here. If you want to move out of the West, I think Jocelyn Cesari has some very good thoughts, but you'll hear about that from me tomorrow on her panel. And it also further develops your theme of religion's role in democratization, which I think is important. But for me, the why did the resurgence occur when it did, the whole concept of the evolution of religion in the state, the separation of religion from the state, and the religion floundering without the support of the state, and then finally finding its own roots in society and coming back. I think that's a very, very important story, and I think it's one we should pay more attention to. Finally, your award-winning book, Religious Freedom in Islam, and also an amazing book, and it answered a number of questions that I've been having, and it has heavily influenced my thinking. It delves into why some Muslim majority countries provide religious freedom and some do not. That's a question I've been very interested in. But two of the most important insights for me, at least, were that some majority Muslim countries are unfree because they hate religion, not because they love it. And that's an idea that was sort of percolating in my mind a little bit, but you really clarified it for me in a way that I wasn't clarifying it for myself. And I was aware that there was a lot of religious freedom among Muslim majority countries in West Africa. When you discussed that, that wasn't new to me, but I had no clue why. After reading your book and discussing the history of Islam, it's a very contextual, comparative politics, historical discussion, but it truly explained it, and it's a very, very interesting explanation. I think it's a good explanation, and it's also proof why quant people like me can't answer everything, because some things just simply need a non-quantitative historical analysis, and you really are one of the best at that. And so I'm just going to end with a mazel tov and my own little bottle of champagne, and I really love this meme with the kid going, congratulations. So again, I began with congratulations, Dan, and I'm ending with congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So we have got to watch the clock very carefully. We have been pretty much on schedule. So I propose, I think it was Ron Hassner who indicated that he would talk about sovereignty in the work of Dan. Is that correct? And then
more or less correct.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, everything is more or less. But essentially, we should observe about the 5-6 minutes. We have not really overstepped so far, but if we want any discussion from the floor, we have got to watch the time. So over to you.
Thank you, and I assume you can hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
Great. So I'm delighted and honored to be on this panel with Dan and everyone else. When I first founded the Religion and IR section of the ISA 8 years ago, one of the first actions I took as chair was to create an advisory board for our section. And the first person that I invited to sit on that advisory board was Dan, because his work shaped our discipline, but it also shaped my own thinking about religion and politics. Thanks to his writing, thanks to his personal advice, his feedback on my work throughout the years, and his very, very kind mentorship. You're going to hear much about Dan's seminal contributions from my fellow panelists. I would rather not offer that kind of macro view. I'd like to take a different approach and focus on the micro view, a specific moment, a small instance in which Dan's work opened my eyes to the potential inherent in combining religion and IR. So instead of surveying multiple articles or even a single book, I'd like to talk about 5 pages in one of Dan's books. They're probably my favorite 5 pages in any book on religion and IR. They are pages 104 through 109 of Revolutions in Sovereignty. I happen to have a copy with me. I never leave home without it. So why these 5 pages? Because they attempt something that is seemingly impossible. In those 5 pages, Dan goes from John Calvin's theological writings to the foundations of the sovereign international system, one logical step at a time. It's like a Bach chorale, moving in bold chord progressions from key to key until, after modulating through a dozen or so keys, it arrives at a place that is both surprising and feels entirely like home. Consider one of my favorite Bach cantatas. Bach wrote this in 1724. Aus tiefer Not schrei ich zu dir. You can find this in the Bach catalog works number 38. It's based on Psalm 130, Mima amakim karaticha Adonai, or as Dan knows it in Latin, De profundis clamavi. But the Bach cantata is not in Hebrew and it is not in Latin. It is in German. And the translation that Bach uses is by Martin Luther. Luther wrote that translation in 1524 for the first Lutheran hymnal, so that the psalm could be used in Protestant church services. Luther paraphrased the psalm to emphasize the theme of sola fide, grace alone. So Luther writes, and this is not in the original psalm, only your grace and favor count in the forgiveness of our sins. Our deeds are therefore useless. All must fear you and live by your grace. And that hymn became a regular component of Lutheran liturgies. In fact, it was sung at Luther's own funeral, obviously not with Bach's music. And here, by comparison, is a Dan Philpott chorale. It's called No Reformation, No Westphalia. Maybe comparing Dan to Bach is an impolite comparison, given Bach's religious allegiances. But then both Dan and Johann are riffing on Luther, each in his own way. The Bach cantata starts in the key of E, makes its way to A minor, then it shifts to D minor, and then it returns back to the key of E in a concluding chorale. Here's how Philpott modulates. Page 104. Dan starts with Luther's thoughts on the fall of man and the corruption of early modern Christianity. Then he segues to Calvin's attack on the Catholic Church. We are in E major, Phrygian mode, and we're off. Page 105. Dan explores the theological content of that attack, the corruption and false beliefs of the Roman Church, the four solas. But Calvin's attack is not aimed only at the church. Its intended audience includes merchants, leaders, kings, and princes of Europe. This is A minor. It's not a great leap of the imagination, but it's just the beginning of a journey. Page 106. This theological critique has political implications. There is no single universal church under one head. The Catholic Church should be stripped of its secular powers. Those powers in turn should be assumed by secular leaders, implying a separation of two realms. Page 107. But this is not a separation of church and state. Drawing on Paul, or as Dan likes to call him, Saint Paul, the reformers encouraged the state to play a strong role in religion, suppressing dissent, organizing independent splinter churches in separate territorial realms. Not a state entangled in religion, but a state free from the temporal power of the Pope. We've arrived in D minor. I'm now on page 108. This transfer of power away from the Pope gives secular rulers complete and supreme authority. In other words, it gives them sovereignty. Dan writes, and I quote, "Sovereignty in substance, if not in name, comes directly out of the very propositions of Protestant theology." He says directly, but somehow we've passed through three keys to get here, from E major to D minor. This theological attack pits the Holy Roman Emperor against the reformers, and that in turn binds the reformers in even closer ties of alliance with the sovereign princes who now protect them. And finally, page 109, this is why the Reformation changes the European political order, unlike any prior theological challenge to Catholicism. It didn't just mount a comprehensive attack on Roman Catholicism, it married that attack to a political theology. It proposed a new temporal sovereignty, which would take the shape of the Westphalian order. E major, we're back home, safe and sound. Thank you, Dan, for writing those 5 pages, which I first read halfway through working on my dissertation. Thank you for showing me that an interest in the structure of international politics could go hand in hand with a close reading of religious text, that I didn't have to choose between specializing in religion and a superficial attention to world affairs, or specializing in IR with a superficial attention to religious ideas, that you could build a bridge connecting both and be truly a scholar of religion and IR at the same time. And on a completely unrelated note, thanks for being a mensch, a truly kind spirit and a generous soul. Mazel tov, Dan, on this very much deserved honor.
Thank you so much, Ron. Yes, I never thought about it so musically before. Thank you.
You are muted, Vendulka. Vendulka, I don't hear you. I don't know whether others do.
She's muted.
No, yeah, unmute yourself, Vendulka, and please repeat what you said.
Okay, you look unmuted right now. Oh no, she's still muted.
Why doesn't somebody just go next?
I think it is me who will go next. I'll just start. Everybody hear me? Okay, good. All right, I'll get started. Yes, I would like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and congratulate you, Dan. And to Mazal Tov, I will add tebrikler and mabruk. So it is really an honor to be on this panel because as a scholar who got her PhD in 2010, I feel like I grew up with your work. Like the main things I learned about religion and IR were from the work of a few scholars, and you were one of those people. So I owe you a lot in terms of that training and literature, which Jonathan did a great job covering. So, and I also would like to thank you, what Ron said about you being a mensch. Really, you have always been so generous with your time with junior scholars. You have always been very humble. And I have always appreciated your kind, generous mentorship. So it is beyond the solid quality, amazing quality of your work. You have been very generous in sharing it with the rest of us. So I will just, for the interest of time, I will quickly touch upon two things. One is, this is my book that I take everywhere, Just and Unjust Peace. That I have very much appreciated. And I think, like your other work, it's a huge contribution to the literature, especially in terms of reconciliation, peace, and religion, the fields that I work at as well. So I will not go into details, obviously, but what I always appreciate about your work is your openness to engage multiple religions and their contributions. So it is not something that all of us can do in a fair, equitable way. And I always appreciate how you find the sources of constructive dialogue and reconciliation, and not just in Christianity, but in multiple religions. And I was, in the past week, I was revisiting some of the insights of Just and Unjust Peace, and I saw how it is applicable to some of the debates we are having right now in the United States. So I think everyone should take a look at your book and use your insights when we are discussing about important issues ranging from racial issues to political divisions or gender dynamics. It is such an informative work that that would impact our thinking in almost every issue, to be open, to be communicative, and also to be able to forgive and to be able to make up for certain mistakes and injustices, and building socially just institutions. So it is an amazing book that takes religion seriously, religious expertise and knowledge seriously. And I already wrote an entire blog about this, so I'm not going to go too much into it. But I decided to actually read it from cover to cover again to just remember some of the amazing insights you provided. The second book I would like to talk about is Religious Freedom in Islam, which I had the privilege to read before it was published. And it immediately became one of my favorite works. Again, if somebody else had given me that book with the title, I would probably say, oh, I don't know whether I would like to read it. It's a very ambitious undertaking. But I love that the sophistication you bring to the table, discussing some critical issues in Islam and going beyond black and white, not only recognizing and being able to discuss Islam and Catholicism together, but also being able to discuss Islam in itself and looking at different contexts in a very culturally sensitive way. And recognizing, of course, that a religion is not a monolith. It is, its practice is informed by many contextual factors. And in the end, being able to point to the sources that we can all refer to make our conversation much more constructive. So again, in a world that is overwhelmed by divisions and black and white, right and wrong type of answers, shortcuts, you have taught us to look at things from a much more complicated, sophisticated perspective. And I mean, I learned a lot from your work, comparatively engaging not only religions, but multiple theologies. I learned from you a lot about this constructive dialogue, and also ability to engage, again, multiple faith traditions in the discussion of sometimes seemingly secular topics, the things that have been handled by secular theories, scholars. So like my colleagues said, both Jonathan and Ron, and in the beginning, Nukhet, Kristen and Renat, you have really opened new dimensions for us. With each of your articles, with each of your books, we have learned a lot. It changed our thinking entirely. I really cannot wait for your future books and articles and what is next. So thank you very much for everything you have done, everything you have published, and we are so lucky to have you.
Vendulka, I think it's the microphone sign on the upper left corner of the screen.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, excellent.
Anyway, that was very, very good. We are, on schedule more or less, not quite. So I think we now have we will proceed with Professor Agensky, if it is possible, and then Professor Kuru.
Is it just me? I can't hear.
What did Jonathan say?
I haven't said anything yet. I just unmuted now. I'm good to go. I just want to mention that I can't actually see anyone whatsoever. So if anybody's giving me a massive thumbs down or the kill kind of look, I unfortunately can't see that. So please send a text if there's an issue, but I'll just begin. So hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Agensky from Ohio University. I'm currently the vice chair of the Religion and IR Executive Committee. And it's really my honor to join such a wonderful collection of colleagues in honor of our 2021 Distinguished Scholar recipient, Daniel Philpott. And I'd really like to extend my gratitude to Vendulka and Renat for putting this together and inviting me to participate. I don't know Dan personally, unlike many here, but like many here, I am deeply familiar with his work, which has been influential in my own research as it has for so many others. And so I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to recognize and celebrate Dan's work in advancing the field of religion and international relations, and talk a little bit about its importance, if even from my own, albeit limited perspective. And so I'm going to speak very briefly as a newer scholar in the field in order to conserve time for others in such a crowded space of formidable scholars in religion and IR, and leave room for concluding discussion. And to that end, I would really like to flag 3 aspects of Dan's work that have been impactful to me in that classic style of the academic trinity, to which I would like to bear witness if I could somewhat mix my religious metaphors. And these are his historically informed approach and contributions to thinking about the international system and IR theory more generally, and the importance of thinking about religion in the constitution of international political order. The ways in which he's been such a central and important figure in bringing religion back into the conversation of political science, and showing how religion and religions matter, while also persuasively illustrating the complicated sources of its neglect, and helping us as a field navigate our way around them, including by taking seriously matters of political theology. And by using and applying these insights to pragmatic and normative questions relating to issues of sustainable peace, or what he's called strategic peace and justice, which not only enrich our understandings of how international peace and justice are and could be pursued by the international community, but also gives voice and representation to the religious actors and institutions often neglected or mischaracterized in peace and conflict literature, but who are always there in the international political world working toward constructive ends. One of the things that strikes me about this as a collective body of work is how Dan has been able to make so many sophisticated methodological and epistemological contributions to the field in ways that are simultaneously methodologically eclectic or ecumenical, and also deeply rigorous, something to which many of us can only aspire. And I know that this has certainly been somewhat of a model that I've really sought to follow in my own research. My first encounter with Dan's work was as a grad student in IR. Having just made the switch into a field I quickly realized I actually knew very little about, having completed my undergraduate degree in social anthropology and religious studies. I found myself immediately confused by some of the approaches and paradigms used in IR as a subfield of political science, which I had stayed away from as an undergrad. After several conversations, my advisor, Tariq Barkawi, himself a critical constructivist and post-colonial theorist out of the Minnesota School, recommended I read Dan's 2001 monograph, Revolutions and Sovereignty, How Ideas Shaped Modern International Relations. Dan's emphasis on the Protestant Reformation as a touchstone for critical ideas, forms of social power, and understandings of authority that would come to propel these revolutions and counter-revolutions in the principles and prerogatives of sovereignty, and make possible the constitution of the modern international system, or as he describes, the constitution of international society, was just so lucid and clarifying, as was his account of how these processes also came to inform and share elective affinities with notions of racial equality and national self-determination that would help underpin decolonization, thereby connecting these two major revolutions in the creation of the Westphalian interstate system and colonial independence as part of a linked but expansive historical process reflective of a common logic of liberation. In his words, the kind of liberation for which all revolutionaries of sovereignty fought, self-determination, the assertion of groups of people to freedom from the oppression of some larger centralized authority. Philpott's work demonstrates the importance of historicizing international political structures and thinking about the interplay of both material and ideational factors in understanding international political transformations. And his use of theory, history, and religion was always something that stood out to me as critical and important, and came to inform many ways the kind of scholarship I aspired to conduct. Especially instructive is how Dan shows us how matters relating to religion can also be used to interrogate, critique, and revise our understandings of international politics more broadly, while calling attention to critical subjective factors in rigorous ways, something that I would still like to see more of in the field. Dan's work in demonstrating how institutions and ideas co-evolve, and how specific political theologies and modes of institutional differentiation interact over time to inform the political goals and strategies of religious actors toward politically inclusive or politically violent ends shows the extent to which, in his words, religious ends and not just identities matter. This is something that I found very helpful in thinking about how to think about religion and politics, and has furnished a great many newer scholars in the field, such as myself, with a rich set of conceptual tools and puzzles in which to do so. Moreover, Dan's work on peace and justice shows just how much these issues are far from merely academic, and he has done so much to advance critical research agendas on the constructive aspects of religious political action in the international system. His many works on international peace and justice have helped bring to light the significant roles played by religious actors in fueling what he calls the age of transitional justice. And in his words, the ways in which pastors and priests, imams and rabbis have organized efforts to heal the wounds of past injustices in villages, cities, and their own religious communities. His research highlights the importance of religious ideas, communities, and organizations in promoting models of reconciliation, especially among confessional publics in the global South, and has also been a significant voice in advocating for more holistic modes of pursuing international peace amid what he has called our current age of peace building. Dan's work bringing together constructivist, historical, and institutional forms of analysis has enriched our conversations about peace building by helping to advance critiques of the liberal peace as not being a robust enough paradigm. And he has done so much to persuasively promote more expansive and capacious approaches to peace that better utilize people power and better utilize what he describes as a far greater array of actors, activities, levels of society, links between societies and time horizons than the dominant thinking recognizes. Importantly, as he argues, these efforts need to better engage religious actors especially, but often ignored in what he describes as combating inequalities that are embedded in global structures of power and wealth. So I would just like to conclude on that note, and on a note of great appreciation for Dan's contributions to the field, and how much I continue to look forward to a great many more contributions as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We have got to now rush through. I think we have got Professor Kuru here, who I have been awaiting with, very anxiously, and so did the PhD student here. He actually is very much implicated in this award because he wrote the nomination letter. So over to Professor Kuru. I don't hear him.
We don't hear you.
God almighty.
No.
Sound.
You still look muted from the system, Ahmet.
Yeah, well, he cannot hear. I have no idea.
I think we lost Ahmet.
Yeah.
Maybe he's trying to reconnect.
Maybe he's rebooting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in which case I think I would put
Leave it to the ISA to come up with a system more annoying than Zoom.
yeah, well, before he comes back, perhaps Kristen, because Kristen actually wanted to follow up from the comments of Professor.
We're going to miss this so much next year when we're live. We'll just have to pretend to speak without voice coming out, so that the person sitting next to us can say, "Ron, you're on mute," and I'll be like.
Okay, I'm always trying to.
He's back. He's
Can
back.
you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, this is like the second coming of Christ. Okay, I am very happy with you, despite the torture ISA put us with this weird software. And
Hallelujah.
you already mentioned from the IR perspective. Let me emphasize then Philpott's contribution to comparative politics. I've been privileged by working with him in APSA, Religion and Politics Section Committee, in Religious Freedom Institution, and we had a great friend, Alfred Stepan. And I remember late Alfred Stepan mentioning, at least I heard 5 times or so, that Dan Philpott's APSR article was the best follow-up to Stepan's twin tolerations article. And in the IR field, we have had the problems you already mentioned. One thing is the domination of, sorry, in the comparative field, we had the problems you mentioned for IR. One issue is the domination of statistics, rational choice, undermining the role of ideas, defining ideas as just epiphenomenal. And Alfred Stepan and Dan Philpott were the pioneers in bringing ideas back into the analysis. And many of Dan's articles and books are very important on that. Second issue I want to emphasize is Dan's contribution to the analysis of democracy, religion, and secularism. And he challenged the idea that religion is always pro-authoritarian, whereas secularism is always pro-democratic. Bringing many examples and theoretical insights, Dan Philpott successfully challenged this idea. The third issue is his activism. As many of you already emphasized, Dan is no longer a scholar, but he's an organic intellectual, bringing his scholarship to the real world, try to build bridges and promoting peace. So I very rarely read a book 3 times. And I read his book on religious freedom in Islam, first as a participant to the workshop, then manuscript reviewer, then after it has been published. And I see all of his characteristics of his contributions in this book, because his recent award-winning book shows us the role of ideas and use ideas as an explanatory variable. Second, he shows us that in the Muslim world, you may have a pro-democratic Islamic movements and pro-authoritarian Islamic movements, as well as pro-democratic secularist movements and pro-authoritarian secularist movements. And he really tried to provide a normative aspects by comparing Catholicism and Islam and explaining the seeds of democracy and religious freedom in Islam. He tried to make a contribution to the real life. It is not a simple analysis, but an attempt to promote religious freedom. And he is very brave in his challenge to postmodernity and certain postmodernist cliché defining religious freedom as a Western agenda. He says, no, it's a universal right and universal value. And therefore, Dan Philpott, while being a great scholar, at the same time as an intellectual, he has had a fight on many grounds in the battlefield. It's a metaphor in terms of defending the importance of ideas against quantitative method defenders, and also in terms of defending religious freedom to those against who just provide too much cultural relativism, postmodernism, and defining religious freedom as just a Western value. So let me summarize by saying that as a scholar, I've been privileged to have Dan Philpott in my field. As a person, I've been honored to have him as a friend, and his award is well-deserved, and congratulations, my friends, once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Kristen wanted to say a few words which in a way reverberate, you harmonize with what you already said, because many of you actually were students influenced by Philpott's work. And she is now a current PhD student, and she wanted just to conclude how terribly useful she finds his work from the point of view of lucidity. And anyway, so Kristen, just few words, because we have got to start wrapping it up, because we have got now people who are now visible and they might want to ask anything. But prior to that, as soon as you finish, we will pass the buck on to Dan, whether he would care to respond. So Kristen, over to you.
Of course. And I promise to keep all my statements brief. But yes, as the Professor Kubálková said, I am a current PhD. I just became one. And Dr. Philpott's work was introduced to me during my final year of my master's. I was actually in the process of writing my master's dissertation. And I promise it's going to tie in with what Professor Kuru has said. As I was getting my subject approved, the advisor looked at me and said, "Not enough numbers. There's not enough qualitative. Go back and think on it some more." And I was blindsided because I had been working on this for almost the full 2 years. And I was introduced to your book, Religious Freedom in Islam, at around that time, and seeing a work that was, again, challenging that rational choice theory, challenging that idea of positivism, challenging that domination of statistics and quantitative and numbers, was kind of that push to, no, I'm going to write about my topic. I'm going to write about my subject. And lo and behold, a semester later, I was able to graduate with it. So speaking as a graduate student, having a distinguished scholar that challenges that is not only inspiring for graduate students, for undergraduate students as well. I had many undergraduate students that read through the book and were similarly inspired. But it's also a way of just opening up the field to new possibilities, to finding what we want to research, to finding what we want to hopefully one day add to the knowledge, to the field. So I just want to say thank you so much for that inspiration to not just me, but to many other young scholars who are still kind of finding their way in the field. And as this is probably going to be the most graduate thing I've ever said, I want to bring mention to the way you write, to your prose. It is clear, it is precise, it is detailed. And so many fantastic scholars fall into kind of this trap where they want to explain something so complex, so important, that it almost becomes cryptic. You're trying to find a code, and as a young scholar, that's so difficult when you're still trying to find your footing and find a foundation within the field. And your prose is absolutely excellent. It's such a fantastic foundation, fantastic introduction to this aspect of the field, which again has inspired so many of my classmates, both graduate and undergraduate. So I just want to say thank you so much for encouraging so many young scholars, for inspiring so many young scholars such as myself. And I'm just so happy to see that you're being celebrated for your work. And I'm sure that not only will you have many incredible works to come, but you will inspire many young scholars in the future.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think this is pretty much everybody who was scheduled to speak, but I'm glad that we had Kristen, because I think this is so important that, the subfield of international relations and religion thrives. I think this is so important that the work actually, what the section of religion and international relations is foundational for the continuation of this very important subfield. With that said, Dan, would you care to receive all of this accolade without blushing?
Well, a little bit hard to do. Receiving an award like this, such as this, that reflects, the kind of many years of one's work, makes me realize how dependent I am on others for my work. We have this illusion that we're doing it all alone, sitting in our desk in a room, but in fact, we're so profoundly dependent upon others, beginning with family, then friends and colleagues, teachers, mentors, the grace of God. So I'm just filled with gratitude. So many on this call, and people who have given these wonderful, beautiful presentations are people who I've learned an enormous amount from, and it's good to meet you both, Jonathan Agensky and Kristen. I'm very humble about your that you've benefited from my writings and my work, and so there's a kind of fellowship that emerges among people who write and trade ideas, and so many of you I can call good friends, and that fellowship is something really priceless. It's the way that we truly do things, even if we don't realize it enough. Vendolka and Renat, you did more than I could ever have expected in putting together that lovely presentation. So much fun, and you took this far beyond what was expected of anyone in putting that together. I'm really humbled and massively grateful for it. Thank you everyone for composing such nice remarks. And the case of Ron, compose is especially an apropos verb. Also, as Ahmet said, a good chance to remember in memory Al Stepan and what an influence he had upon us all. So the panel reflects a field of study that has grown up and flourished in political science over the past 2 decades. Jonathan and Ron and so many others were pioneers. For decades, virtually the entire academy in the West thought that religion is irrelevant, headed for extinction, and where it still existed, really the source of violence and division. The attacks of September 11, 2001 reversed the charge that it was irrelevant, although perhaps enhanced the charge that it was violent. I remember being on a small group of scholars at Harvard with Sam Huntington and Brian Hare and David Little and Jessica Stern, and we formed around the year 2000 to try to boost the study of religion and global politics. We applied for a grant that first year and we didn't receive it, and Sam Huntington was rather rueful. We lost out to a project that was looking at the effect of war on health. I'll never forget Sam Huntington in his inimitable style said, "Well, I would think war would be bad for health." So he was kind of rueful about that. Then the attacks of September 11th happened. We applied for the grant the next year, and we received it. We were off to the races. That gave us the support that eventually became God's Century. And but in any case, there is, of course, the violent and divisive side of religion. I tried to study peace building and religious freedom and reconciliation to focus more on the positive contribution, again, in contrast to the secularization theory. On a broader canvas, though, and this is something you can say in a little panel like this, I'd like to propose a gestalt shift for the field. You all, or way in which this field can bring a gestalt shift to the world. You all will know the gestalt drawings. You see an old lady, but if you look hard and long enough and try to see it in a different way, you can see a young lady, or the duck and the rabbit, and so forth. It teaches that although we may be fixed upon looking at the world in one way, it's possible that it's something else. Much depends on which features our mind focuses on. In my study of religion over 25 years, I've become convinced that the secularization theory had it backwards. Over the vast sweep of history and across the expanse of the entire globe, and I do mean to take that wide of a perspective, human beings have been religious. Reading Martin Riesebrod and Christian Smith in the past decade or so has convinced me of this anew. I would say that humans are naturally religious. They are the kind of creature that asks ultimate questions and affirms a transcendent being or power as an answer to them. Even if they don't, or maybe are agnostic or atheists, they still think about these questions and wrestle with them and posit some kind of answer to them. Secularism, by contrast, is the anomaly. It is a construction of that peculiar episode, that small island of human experience called the modern West. Its rise and fall, or at least its uncertain future, in my view, are what need to be explained. I am also convinced that how people understand and carry their religion, including their secularism, influences what sort of politics they adopt and how they live it out. And I think I'm a minority in this view, but should the view grow, then so too will our merry band of scholars who study religion. Thank you again for an extremely humbling and honoring panel, and I look forward to continuing to grow together in fellowship and conversation and mutual trading of ideas and encouragement in the years ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know how the ISA organizes it, but nobody switched us off. So I would like to, first of all, ask the members of the panel whether they would like to add something after this incredible finale, which we have just listened to, from which I think it is so well put. That we are a sort of a little island, the West, with its secularization and pretensions of universalism, that that should be printed yet on another website, which already you have happened to do once before. So I open it now to whoever wants to actually make some additional comment.
So I see a hand on the chat. Yes, I see. I don't know how to give the floor to the audience, but I see John Owen
Yes, I think he's saying
to...
that, yes, then you're indeed a path breaker. Like all path breakers, you often encounter obstacles in your scholarship and activism, I'm guessing. What sustains you? Why do you keep going? What others might give up or at least adapt heavily to the established way of thinking and operating?
Well,
So
I think
one thing I want to... Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have another panel at 11. If I leave early, please forgive me, all of you. And congratulations again, Dan, and thank you for participating in this wonderful panel.
So over to Daniel, or you will ask a question.
So yeah, there was a good question about what sustains me, and it's interesting that I think maybe this is on a panel on religion and politics, but I once heard a talk. I think it was in Germany. I was on sabbatical there, and somebody gave a talk at the Humboldt Fellowship, saying that the key virtue for scholarship is doubt. You have to be willing to doubt things, and maybe doubt the conventional wisdom or what have you. And that's what drives a scientist, is doubt. But I think there's probably insights there. But I've always thought more that the key to scholarship is faith. That you have a sense of the world, you have a sense of how something works, and you start off the inquiry and you don't know, and you don't know how it's going to turn out, and but it might not turn out very well at first, and you have to look at it differently, or you might not get your article accepted or your book accepted or what have you, and have to keep plugging on. But there's a certain kind of faith you have that's willing to stay with the proposition, stay with the idea, stay with that way of thinking, and thinking that have a kind of faith that it's going to pan out. Maybe not in the way I originally thought it was, but that in a different version it will. And in the sense that the world is a place where religion matters, and where that is going to show up in political outcomes and political behaviors, and and then there's lots of reasons that people will give you why that's not the case, and it'd be easy to, when then faced with that, to kind of give up and say, well, that wasn't worth trying in the first place. But I think there's that initial faith that you have that you're going to stick with it and try to keep believing in it, and then you'll find a way to show it persuasively.
Well, that, I think, incidentally, is St. Augustine, who actually declared that to understand is to believe.
Faith precedes understanding. Yes, that's right.
Yes, so I'm happy that we had a question about it. Do we have any other question here?
Yes, there is another question. Yes, we have 4 minutes left, but there is another question from Grigory Betitsa. Congratulations, Dan. Your scholarship has inspired so many, myself included. I wanted to ask which research avenues have not yet been taken, and you think deserve greater attention moving forward. Maybe the modern history of secularism, I gather.
Yeah, well, that was something that when I thought of those remarks about the Gestalt shift and about thinking of the world as kind of from a baseline, as thinking of the world as a religious place, and then seeing the efforts to kind of make it not religious as the anomaly or as a kind of project. Yeah, then my next thought was, hey, that would be neat to write a book about the rise and fall of secularism. Where did secularism come from? And now Jonathan Fox has already done that as an excellent book on secularism. Charles Taylor has a book on secularism. People have written on this, but I think a kind of a history on the kind of I think that the kind of history of how it got started and how it got going and how it wielded influence and how it was propelled by people who had a kind of faith as well, who had who really believed in that paradigm, even though the evidence might have been against it, and believed in the sense that they were then willing to kind of impose it, build regimes around it, sometimes with the result of great violence and upheaval. But to look at the kind of intentionality and to look at the kind of inspirations and motivations that led to that historically and led to the kind of peaking out of it, maybe 1950s, 1960s, and then maybe how it kind of then ran out of gas or declined or petered out somewhat. Although I have to say, the jury is still out. We're still, my colleagues David Campbell and Jeff Lehman here in political science in Notre Dame have published a book about the kind of resurgence of secularism and people leaving religion and so forth. And so we have to be careful about not knowing where we are in the mountain range, whether we're about to go up another big mountain or whether we're still coming down one. And that's part of the challenge of scholarship. But writing on the kind of historical sweep of secularism, I think, would be a great project.
Yeah, well, I would like to thank George Batista, because his work on post-secular is something which I'm actually asking students to read, because I think he is going the right way. Anyway.
Yeah, Gregorio is a wonderful emerging scholar, fantastic book on religious freedom, and it's been wonderful to get to know and trade ideas with Gregorio.
I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name.
That's okay, yeah.
Anyway, do we have any other question? Renat, do you see anything?
No, I think we do not have, and we have officially 17 seconds before the session is over. But again, once again, congratulations from me, from all of us. And yes, and Gregorio Batista is saying fascinating project, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, and I would like to say this has been.
Thank you, everybody. Yes,
so
thank you.
Deserved.
Yeah, and congratulations once again. It was a great honor for us.
Thank you, everybody.